Have you ever felt like your entire world was built on a lie? One moment, you have everything you ever dreamed of: a loving husband, a beautiful new baby, a perfect life. The next, the floor vanishes from beneath your feet, and you're falling into an abyss of betrayal and fear. This is a story about a woman who lost everything, only to find what truly matters in the last place she ever thought to look. It's a story that proves that sometimes the most brutal endings are just the beginning of a journey you were always meant to take. Prepare yourself for a story of heartbreak, shocking twists, and the incredible power of the human spirit to heal and love again. Amelia had always craved a family. An orphan raised by her grandmother after her parents' tragic death, she poured all her love and hope into the idea of a home filled with warmth and laughter. When she met Ethan, he seemed like the answer to her prayers. He was a decade older, a successful architect, handsome and confident. He had swept into her life like a hero, protecting her from a mugging one late evening as she walked home from her student teaching job. He was her knight in shining armour. His parents, however, were less than thrilled. To them, Amelia was a girl with no family, no money, and no connections, hardly a suitable match for their only son. They were convinced it was a fleeting romance. But when Amelia discovered she was pregnant just 4 months into their whirlwind relationship, Ethan proposed. The wedding was small and quiet, a stark contrast to the grand life he led. Amelia's grandmother, just before passing away, had warned her. "That man's eyes don't match his smile, honey," she'd whispered, her voice frail. "He listens to his mother too much. A man without his own mind will break the heart of the woman who loves him." Amelia, blinded by love and the promise of a family, had dismissed it as the worry of a doting grandparent. Now, with their newborn daughter, Lily, in her arms, she believed she had proven everyone wrong. She had finally found her happily ever after. The scent of stale coffee and disinfectant still clung to Amelia's clothes from the hospital. The drive home had been suffocatingly silent, a stark contrast to the joyous occasion it was meant to be. Now, standing in the kitchen of their pristine Cleveland apartment, the silence was broken by the crash of ceramic against the wall. A spray of chicken and rice exploded over the cream-coloured paint. Ethan stood there, his face a mask of fury, his chest heaving. "Is this a joke? This is what you serve me? I work all day, and I come home to this slop." His voice was dangerously low. Amelia flinched, pulling the sleeping bundle in her arms tighter. "Ethan, I just got home. The doctor said to take it easy. I did my best." Her words were a whisper swallowed by the tension in the room. "Your best?" he sneered, taking a step closer. The man she married was gone, replaced by a stranger with cold, merciless eyes. "Your best is pathetic. Just like everything else about you lately. All you do is cry or tend to that thing." He gestured dismissively at their daughter, Lily, who stirred at the sound of his harsh tone. The air grew thick with a menace she had never felt before, a chilling premonition that the life she thought she knew was about to shatter. A week crawled by in a haze of fear and confusion. Every day was a minefield. Ethan's moods were a violent storm, his anger erupting without warning. A dish left in the sink, a diaper not changed fast enough, the sound of Lily's soft cries. Anything could trigger a tirade. He'd slam doors, throw things, his words like shards of glass. Amelia walked on eggshells, her body humming with a constant low-grade terror. She tried to talk to him, to understand the source of this sudden, monstrous change. "What happened to us, Ethan? We were happy." He would just laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. "Happy? We were never happy. I was settling, and you were climbing. It's as simple as that." Tonight was different. Tonight, the verbal blows were not enough. After another dinner flew against the wall, Amelia finally found a sliver of courage. "You have to tell me what's going on. I am your wife. This is your daughter." He moved so fast she didn't have time to react. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back until stars exploded behind her eyes. "You want to know?" he hissed, his face inches from hers, his breath sour with whiskey. You really want to know what's going on? His grip tightened, a searing pain shooting down her scalp. My parents were right about you all along, he snarled, each word a venomous jab. They had a test done. A DNA test, Amelia. Her blood ran cold. What are you talking about? That's impossible. She could barely form the words, her throat tight with disbelief and rising panic. Oh, it's very possible, he continued, a cruel smile twisting his lips. My mother's friend works at the hospital lab. A little strand of hair is all it takes. And guess what? 0% probability. 0. That baby is not mine. The world tilted on its axis. It couldn't be true. It was a lie. A grotesque, twisted lie. Ethan was Lily's father. He was the only man she had ever been with. No, she sobbed, the denial clawing its way out. Your mother is lying. She never wanted me here. His face darkened. Don't you dare talk about my mother. With a final brutal shove, he sent her stumbling backward. Her head connected with the hard edge of the kitchen counter. A flash of white light. Then darkness swallowed her whole as she crumpled to the floor, the sound of Lily's wailing a distant, fading echo. She woke to the sting of cold water on her face. Ethan was standing over her, a glass pitcher dripping onto the linoleum. Her head throbbed with a blinding pain, and a sticky wetness matted her hair. He dragged her to her feet, his fingers digging into her arm like talons. Get up, he commanded, his voice devoid of any emotion. He shoved her toward the bedroom. You have 30 minutes. Pack your bags and get out of my house, and take your bastard child with you. The words hit her harder than the blow to her head. Ethan, please, she begged, her voice cracking. Where am I supposed to go? I have no money, nowhere to turn. A flicker of something. Was it satisfaction? Crossed his face. Not my problem anymore, he said coldly. Don't even think about trying to put her on my birth certificate. Don't even think about child support. If you do, I'll make you regret it. I'll tell everyone what you are, and I will make sure you never see a penny. He stood in the doorway, a merciless guard, as she numbly pulled out a worn suitcase her grandmother had given her. The dream was over. The nightmare had just begun. Her hands trembled as she packed, her mind a chaotic storm of pain and fear. She moved on autopilot, grabbing the few things that were truly hers. A handful of baby clothes, the diapers she'd bought last week, a small box of her mother's jewellery. Her movements were clumsy, her vision blurred by tears and the dizzying throb in her head. She found a bottle and a can of formula she'd received as a sample, stuffing them into the bag. Her milk might dry up from the stress. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She had to think. She had to survive for Lily. Her brain, clouded by the concussion she surely had, struggled to form a plan. With a glance at Ethan, who was now impatiently tapping his foot, she carefully dressed Lily, wrapping her in a warm blanket. She pulled on a baseball cap, hoping to hide the swelling and bruising that was already starting to colour her face. As she walked out the door of the home she thought was forever, she didn't look back. She couldn't. The man she loved had become a monster, and the life she had built was nothing but ash. The city at night was a concrete jungle of indifferent lights and shadows. Each step was an agony, her head pounding in rhythm with her frantic heartbeat. The weight of the suitcase in one hand and her precious daughter in the other was almost unbearable. She walked for what felt like hours, block after block, with no destination in mind. The bustling sounds of Cleveland faded into a muted roar. She needed to rest, just for a moment. She spotted a wooden bench in a small, deserted park, tucked away from the main street. Sinking onto it, she clutched Lily to her chest, the baby's warmth a tiny anchor in a sea of despair. The exhaustion was a physical force pulling her down. Her eyelids grew heavy. The world swam, and the edges of her vision turned dark. She fought to stay awake, terrified she might drop the baby, but her body betrayed her. Leaning her aching head against the cold, hard back of the bench, Amelia's consciousness finally slipped away, leaving her and her newborn child vulnerable under the dim glow of a solitary streetlight. She awoke to the sterile smell of antiseptic and the soft, rhythmic beeping of a machine. A dull ache radiated from her bandaged head. The room was bathed in the faint pre-dawn light filtering through a large window. Panic seized her, cold and sharp. "Lily!" she gasped, trying to sit up, but a wave of nausea and dizziness forced her back against the pillows. A kind-faced nurse with weary eyes rushed to her side. "Easy there, honey. You took a nasty fall. Someone found you in the park and called 911. You have a severe concussion." The nurse's voice was gentle, but Amelia's mind was screaming. "My baby, where is my baby?" The nurse placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "She's safe. She's in the paediatric ward just down the hall. A doctor checked her over and she's perfectly healthy. We gave her a bottle and she's sleeping like an angel." Relief washed over Amelia so intensely it left her weak. Lily was safe. For now, that was all that mattered. "We need to ask you some questions about what happened," the nurse said softly. "Your injuries, they don't look like they're from a simple fall." Amelia just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I fell," she lied, the words tasting like poison. "I was just so tired." Later that morning, they allowed her to visit the paediatric ward. Her heart ached as she saw Lily, so small and alone in a clear plastic bassinet. She looked so fragile. Amelia's gaze drifted to the bassinet next to Lily's. In it lay a baby boy, his tiny fists clenched as he slept. Unlike the other babies, there were no cards, no balloons, no stuffed animals, just a plain white hospital blanket. "He's a little fighter," a new nurse commented, noticing where Amelia was looking. "The police brought him in last night. Found him in a duffel bag at the bus station. He's a safe haven baby." The term hung in the air. "His mother just left him?" Amelia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It happens more than you think," the nurse said with a sigh. "At least she left him somewhere warm, where he'd be found quickly. He'll go into the foster care system soon. He's a sweet little thing, barely cries. Almost like he knows there's no one to cry for." Amelia looked from the abandoned boy to her own daughter. Both of them, in their own way, had been cast out. She felt an inexplicable, powerful connection to this little stranger, a shared vulnerability that tugged at the raw edges of her heart. When Amelia was stable enough to be moved from the ER, they placed her in a shared room to monitor her concussion. Her new roommate was a young woman with a bright, infectious smile, despite the pained way she clutched her side. "Hi, I'm Chloe," she said. "Suspected appendicitis, but I think it was just some bad tacos." Amelia managed a weak smile. "Amelia!" Over the next day, an unlikely friendship blossomed in the quiet hum of the hospital room. Chloe's cheerful chatter was a welcome distraction from the storm raging inside Amelia. It was surprisingly easy to talk to her, a complete stranger. After Chloe's husband Ben visited, bringing her a gossip magazine and a contraband chocolate bar, Amelia found herself confiding in her. The whole sordid story came pouring out, the sudden change in Ethan, the vicious lies, the assault. Chloe listened, her expression shifting from disbelief to pure rage. "That absolute monster," she fumed. "He can't get away with this, Amelia. You can't let him." "What can I do?" Amelia whispered, feeling hopeless. "I have nothing." Chloe's eyes lit up with a fierce determination. "Oh, you have more than you think. My husband, Ben, he's a lawyer, and he is going to help you." Ben arrived the next day, his friendly demeanour replaced by a professional focus. He listened intently as Amelia recounted the events, taking notes in a small, leather-bound book. "First things first," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "We need to get a birth certificate for Lily. Since you're still legally married, Ethan is presumed to be the father. We will put his name on it. It's his legal responsibility, whether he likes it or not." The thought of facing Ethan, even on paper, sent a jolt of fear through her. "He threatened me," she said, her voice trembling. "He said he'd ruin me if I did." Ben's expression hardened. "Those are the threats of a bully and an abuser. We can file for a restraining order immediately. He won't be able to come near you or Lily." He then explained about social programs like WIC that could provide food and formula, and how to apply for emergency housing. For the first time in days, a tiny flicker of hope ignited within Amelia. She wasn't entirely alone. She had a path, a way forward. "I can't stay in this city, Ben," she said, a new resolve in her voice. "I have a place. My grandmother's old house, a few hours from here. It's all I have left." The bus ride was long and grueling. The rhythmic jostling of the old vehicle did little to soothe her throbbing head or the anxiety twisting in her gut. Lily slept most of the way, a small, warm weight against her chest. Every time Amelia looked down at her daughter's perfect face, she felt a surge of protective love so fierce it almost took her breath away. This was why she had to be strong, for Lily. They arrived in Maple Creek as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The town was just as she remembered it from childhood summers, quiet, sleepy, and nestled among rolling hills. The air smelled of damp earth and pine. Her grandmother's house stood at the end of a long, gravel driveway, slightly weathered but still standing proud. The paint was peeling and weeds choked the flower beds, but to Amelia it was a fortress. It was safety. Using the old key she'd always kept, she pushed open the heavy oak door. The house sighed as she entered, releasing the scent of old wood, dried lavender, and a lifetime of memories. This was her sanctuary now, their sanctuary. The first few days were a blur of activity. Amelia threw herself into cleaning, scrubbing away the layers of dust and time. It was hard, physical work, but it was cathartic. With every swipe of the rag, she felt like she was cleansing her own soul, pushing out the darkness of the past week. The house was filled with her grandmother's presents. In the pantry, she found jars of canned peaches and strawberry jam, a testament to a love that transcended time. In a cedar chest upstairs, she discovered a trove of her own baby clothes, carefully washed and folded. "Look, Lily," she whispered, holding up a tiny yellow dress. "We have everything we need right here." One evening, exhausted but content, she sat on the porch swing, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance. Lily was asleep in her arms. The silence of the countryside was a soothing balm. There were no angry shouts, no slamming doors. There was only the gentle chirping of crickets and the whisper of the wind in the trees. For the first time in a long time, Amelia felt a fragile sense of peace. She was a survivor. They were survivors. A few mornings later, a sharp knock on the front door startled her. Peeking through the curtains, she saw a tall man standing on her porch. He looked to be in his late 30s, with a kind, tired face and dark, serious eyes. She opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" The man gave a small, apologetic smile. "Sorry to bother you. I'm Daniel. My mother, Lynn, lives next door. She was worried when she saw lights on over here. Thought maybe squatters had moved in. She asked me to check." Amelia's heart beat a little faster. She remembered a kindly Mrs. Lynn from her childhood. "I'm Amelia. This was my grandmother's house." Daniel's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Amelia? Of course. I remember you as a kid with pigtails who was always trying to climb our apple tree." A faint smile touched her lips, but she quickly became self-conscious, remembering the still visible bruise on her cheek, now a sickly yellow-green. She instinctively raised a hand to cover it. Daniel's professional gaze missed nothing. His friendly demeanour shifted, replaced by a quiet concern that made her skin prickle. He didn't comment, but she knew he had seen it, and she knew he understood it wasn't from a fall. He cleared his throat, breaking the awkward silence. "Well, it's good to know the house is in the right hands. My mum will be thrilled. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." He turned to leave, but then paused. "I'm a doctor, by the way, an ER doc at the county hospital. That's a nasty bruise you have there. Head injuries can be tricky. Are you having any dizziness or blurred vision?" The question was gentle but direct. I fell down some stairs," she stammered, the lie feeling flimsy and foolish. He simply nodded, not pushing, but his eyes held a deep, unspoken understanding that unnerved her. "All right. Well, the offer still stands." Later that afternoon, he returned. He didn't knock, just left 2 large grocery bags on the porch. They were filled with diapers, formula, fresh vegetables, and a warm, roasted chicken from the town deli. Tucked inside was a note written on a prescription pad. "Every new mom needs a little help. Please accept this. Dan." Amelia stared at the bags, a lump forming in her throat. It was the first act of pure, unconditional kindness she had received in a very long time, and she didn't know how to handle it. Meanwhile, back in Cleveland, a different kind of drama was unfolding. After kicking Amelia out, Ethan had descended into a self-destructive spiral of alcohol and takeout food. He told his parents a fabricated story of Amelia running off with another man, a tale they eagerly believed and spread among their social circle. One night, after polishing off a bottle of expensive scotch, he lit a cigarette and passed out on the sofa. The smouldering cigarette fell into the cushions. The fire started slowly, a wisp of smoke before erupting into an inferno. Neighbours called 911 when thick, black smoke poured from the apartment windows. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. Ethan, who had once seemed so powerful and indestructible, was gone, a victim of his own reckless rage and a single, careless mistake. The news of the tragic accident hit the local media, a brief story about a successful architect who died in a house fire. His parents, grief-stricken and vengeful, immediately blamed the runaway wife, telling police she must have done it for the insurance money before she fled. Chloe saw the news report online. She recognized the name, the apartment building. A cold dread washed over her. She immediately called Ben. "It's him," she said, her voice tight. "It's Amelia's husband." Ben, ever the lawyer, went into action. He made a few calls, confirming the details. The police were looking for Amelia, but not as a suspect. Her alibi was ironclad. Hospital records and the 911 call from the park placed her miles away, unconscious, long before the fire ever started. But another problem had emerged. Ethan's parents, as next of kin, had filed to be the sole heirs to his considerable estate, a luxury car, a stock portfolio, and a hefty life insurance policy. They had conveniently failed to mention to their lawyer that Ethan had a wife and a child. "They're trying to cut her out completely," Ben said to Chloe, his voice grim. "They're trying to erase her and Lily. We have to tell her." Without a second thought, they packed an overnight bag, cancelled their weekend plans, and started the 3-hour drive to the quiet, forgotten town of Maple Creek. Amelia deserved to know the truth, and she needed a friend by her side when she heard it. The sight of Ben and Chloe's car pulling up her gravel driveway sent a wave of both joy and apprehension through Amelia. She ran out to hug Chloe, relieved to see a friendly face. But one look at their solemn expressions told her this was not a social visit. They sat at the old kitchen table, the one where her grandmother used to roll out pie crusts, and Ben gently explained everything. He told her about the fire, about Ethan's death, and about his parents' attempt to seize the inheritance. Amelia listened in stunned silence, her mind struggling to process the information. Ethan was gone. The monster who had haunted her every thought was simply gone. She felt a confusing mix of emotions, a flicker of shock, a wave of profound sadness for the man he once was, but overwhelmingly, a deep, bone-weary sense of relief. The fear was over. She was truly free. "They accuse me of—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. "They tried," Ben confirmed, "but it didn't work. Amelia, you are a widow, and you and Lily are his legal heirs. You're entitled to everything." The thought was staggering. She was no longer penniless. Lily's future was secure. Amelia looked out the window at the peaceful garden. Her grandmother's roses still valiantly blooming. She thought of the cold look in Ethan's eyes, the sting of his hand, the cruelty of his parents. She thought of the money, the apartment, the car, all symbols of a life that had turned out to be a hollow facade. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Ben and Chloe looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean, no?" Chloe asked. "Amelia, this is your chance. It's justice." "It's not justice. It's blood money," Amelia replied. turning back to face them. I don't want it. I don't want any part of his life or his parents' lives. We have everything we need right here. I want to build a new life, a clean one, with nothing to tie us to that past. Ben started to argue to explain the legal and financial practicalities, but Chloe placed a hand on his arm, shaking her head. She understood. This wasn't about money for Amelia. It was about freedom. It was about choosing a future defined by peace, not by the wealth of the man who had tried to break her. It was the final act of taking back her power. After Ben and Chloe left, promising to handle the legal renunciation of the estate, a profound quiet settled over the house. Amelia felt lighter than she had in months. The decision to walk away from the inheritance had solidified something within her. She didn't need wealth to be happy. She needed safety, peace, and love. Daniel stopped by that evening, a basket of fresh-picked tomatoes from his mother's garden in hand. He found her on the porch swing, gazing at the stars. "You seem different tonight," he said, his voice soft. "Lighter." She told him everything. He listened without interruption, his presence, a steady, comforting anchor in the dark. He didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. He just sat with her, sharing the silence. When she finished, he simply said, "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Amelia." In that moment, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained dissolved, replaced by a current of deep mutual respect and a burgeoning affection that felt as natural and as certain as the rising sun. A new chapter was beginning, not just for her, but for both of them. Summer bled into a golden autumn. The routine of life in Maple Creek became a comforting rhythm. Amelia and Daniel's friendship deepened with each passing day. He would stop by after his shifts at the hospital, his calming presence a balm to her soul. He was wonderful with Lily, holding her with a practiced ease that made Amelia's heart ache in a sweet, unfamiliar way. He never pushed, never pried into the painful corners of her past, but he was always there, ready to listen or to simply help fix a leaky faucet. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch while Lily napped, he finally shared his own story. He told her about his wife and infant son, lost years ago to a cascade of medical errors during childbirth. "I ran away," he confessed, his gaze fixed on the distant hills. "I moved from city to city, burying myself in work. I came back here because my mom got sick. I wanted to be here for her. I never planned on staying. I never planned on feeling again." His vulnerability was a gift, a bridge connecting their two wounded hearts. Amelia reached out and placed her hand over his. They were both survivors, scarred by the past but not broken by it. A few weeks later, Amelia got a call from a frantic Chloe. "You're not going to believe this," she squealed. "We're pregnant, and the doctor thinks it might be twins." The news was a burst of pure joy. It felt like the universe was rebalancing itself, bringing new life and happiness to the people who deserved it most. The conversation reminded Amelia of the other baby, the little boy abandoned at the bus station. A deep, persistent ache settled in her chest whenever she thought of him. She wondered where he was, if he was safe, if he was loved. She mentioned it to Daniel that evening. "I can't stop thinking about him," she said. "The nurse called him Leo. It just seems so unfair. Some people would give anything to have a child, and his mother just—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Daniel looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "There are a lot of things in this world that are unfair, Amelia," he said quietly. "But sometimes we get a chance to make one small part of it a little more right." His words lingered in the air, planting a seed of an idea in her mind, an idea so bold and terrifying that it made her heart beat faster. The idea took root and grew. She couldn't shake the image of that little boy, alone in his bassinet. She saw him in her dreams. She felt a pull toward him that she couldn't explain. Was she crazy? She had just escaped a nightmare, just started to piece her life back together. How could she possibly consider taking on another child, a child with an unknown past and an uncertain future? She finally voiced her thoughts to Daniel, expecting him to be the voice of reason, to gently talk her out of it. I think I want to find him. I want to see if I can adopt him, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. He didn't look surprised. He just smiled, a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. I was wondering when you'd say it out loud, he said. What do you mean? Amelia. I see the way you look when you talk about him. I hear the love in your voice for a child you met for 10 minutes. That's not crazy. That's a mother's heart. He took her hand. But you don't have to do it alone. What if we did it together? His proposal hung in the air between them, shimmering with possibility. Together? She whispered. Daniel, we're not. He moved closer, his gaze steady and sincere. I know, but I want to be. Amelia, I've fallen in love with you. I fell in love with your strength, your kindness and your incredible heart, and I am completely in love with your daughter. He took a deep breath. I know it's fast, and I know you've been through hell, but I want to build a life with you. I want to be a father to Lily and, if we can, a father to Leo. I want us to be a family. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, not of sadness or fear, but of a profound, overwhelming joy. For so long, her idea of family had been tied to pain and betrayal. But Daniel was offering her something new, something real. He wasn't a fantasy knight in shining armour. He was a good man, scarred and real, offering her a partnership built on honesty and shared healing. Yes, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Daniel, 1,000 times, yes. The road to adopting Leo was a mountain of paperwork and bureaucratic hurdles. With Ben's legal guidance and Daniel's unwavering support, they began the arduous process. There were background checks, home studies, and countless interviews with social workers. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, but they faced it together. During this time, they became a true team. They learned to navigate each other's moods, to communicate their fears, and to celebrate small victories, like a successfully filed form or a positive report from their caseworker. Lily, now a gurgling, happy baby, seemed to thrive in the atmosphere of love and stability. She adored Daniel, her face lighting up whenever he entered the room. He would spend hours with her, reading stories, making silly faces, and just holding her close. Watching them together, Amelia felt her last remaining walls of fear and distrust crumble away. This was real. This was family. It wasn't the one she had originally dreamed of, but it was so much better. It was a family forged not from fantasy, but from resilience, courage, and the love that had risen from the ashes. 6 long months later, they stood before a judge in a small, quiet courtroom. Daniel's arm was wrapped securely around Amelia's shoulders. In her arms she held a beautiful, bright-eyed baby boy, Leo. He had his father's dark hair and a smile that could light up the world. They had finally brought him home. The judge smiled down at them. In all my years on the bench, she said, I've rarely seen a more fitting union of a child in need of a home, and a home in need of a child. I hereby declare this adoption finalised. The words were simple, but they held the weight of a new universe. He was theirs. Leo was their son. Walking out of the courthouse and into the bright sunshine, Amelia looked at Daniel, her husband, and at the 2 beautiful children they now shared. Her heart was so full she thought it might burst. The journey had been treacherous, a path littered with pain and loss. But it had led her here, to this perfect, beautiful moment. She had walked through fire and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, surrounded by a love more powerful than she had ever known. Their life in Maple Creek was simple and beautiful. They filled the old farmhouse with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. Daniel's mother, her health improving, doted on her new grandchildren, spoiling them with cookies and handmade quilts. Chloe and Ben visited often, their twin boys adding to the happy chaos. The 2 families, bound by an extraordinary set of circumstances, had become an inseparable clan. Amelia, who had once felt so utterly alone in the world, was now surrounded by a network of love so strong it felt unbreakable. She often thought of her grandmother and her final prophetic words. She had been right about Ethan, but Amelia liked to think that her grandmother could see her now and that she was smiling, knowing that her granddaughter had finally found a man whose eyes and smile were a perfect match and a home where her heart was truly safe. She had found a man who knew how to build things that would last forever. One crisp autumn evening, a year after they brought Leo home, the family was gathered around a bonfire in the backyard. The twins were chasing each other, their laughter echoing in the twilight. Lily was taking wobbly first steps toward Daniel, who was on his knees with his arms outstretched. Leo was curled in Amelia's lap, his head resting sleepily on her shoulder. The firelight danced on their faces, casting a warm, golden glow. Amelia looked at the scene before her, a perfect tapestry of love and belonging. The scars of her past were still there, faint lines on her soul, but they no longer hurt. They were simply a part of her story, a reminder of the darkness she had overcome to reach this light. She was not just a survivor, she was a creator. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and, with courage and an open heart, had built something new and whole. She had built a family. And in the quiet warmth of that perfect evening, she knew with every fibre of her being that she was finally, truly home. The memory of Ethan had faded into a distant echo, a ghost from another lifetime. His parents had vanished after the inheritance was settled, taking their bitterness and greed with them. Amelia never heard from them again, and she was grateful for the silence. Their chapter was closed, the book firmly shut. Her new life was filled with the sounds of her children's giggles, the warmth of her husband's embrace, and the steady, comforting rhythm of a peaceful existence. She had learned that true strength wasn't about avoiding pain, but about walking through it and having the courage to love again. She had learned that family wasn't just about blood. It was about the people who show up, who stay, who love you not in spite of your scars, but because of them. Her life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and it was hers, and it was more beautiful than any fantasy she could have ever dreamed up. Daniel caught her eye from across the fire, his smile filled with a love that still made her breath catch. He scooped Lily into his arms and walked over to her, sitting down and wrapping his free arm around Amelia and Leo. They sat there together, a perfect circle of four, watching the embers of the fire drift up into the star-studded sky like tiny, fleeting constellations. Each spark represented a moment, a memory, a piece of their shared story. It was a story of finding light in the deepest darkness, of discovering strength in utter vulnerability, and of building a future from the wreckage of the past. It was a testament to the idea that no matter how broken you feel, there is always hope. There is always a new beginning waiting just beyond the horizon, in a place you might least expect it, with the people you were always meant to find. In the end, Amelia's story isn't just about escaping a monster. It's about discovering the hero within herself. The ultimate twist wasn't her husband's death or the inheritance she refused, but the quiet realization that she never needed a rescuer. She was the rescuer. She saved herself, she saved her daughter, and she created a space in her heart to save a little boy who was just as lost as she was. The greatest treasures she found weren't in a bank account, but in the unconditional love of a good man, the laughter of her children, and the peace of a home built on a foundation of truth and resilience. She found that a broken heart can heal, and that it can even learn to love more deeply and more fiercely than before. Thank you so much for joining us on this emotional journey. If Amelia's story of strength and survival touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. And now, I have a question for you. Do you believe that our greatest heartbreaks can sometimes lead us to our greatest blessings?